All right, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Let's begin with a prayer. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel in St. Thomas's Church for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Good morning. Good morning. So just a couple of logistics items. For those who are on Zoom, they won't be able to hear the question that you're asking unless you come up to a mic. So if you come up to one of these two mics, that would be very helpful. We're both live on Zoom and here, so we're recording this. So if you want to go back and listen to any of the questions, by all means, we'll be able to do that as well. I think that is it for the formal starting questions. Is there anything else that we need to accomplish before we get started, Terry? Checking from the back? We're good? All right. So last week or 2 weeks ago, we presented our the vestries and the Building and Grounds Committee's recommendation on how to remediate the challenges that we have with the existing bell tower. And as we indicated, the suggestion was made, or we are strongly recommending, that we consider removing the bell tower, replacing it with a roofed structure, and that will serve us better than the challenges we've had with the bell tower over the many years that it has been there. So that is where we are. If I can ask for any questions from the audience, and Edmund and I will do our best to respond based on the work that we've done from the Building and Grounds Committee and vestry perspective.
If I can.
Right there.
Take this off.
Yeah, just stand by the mic. Oh, you're going to turn around.
I'd like to talk to the congregation, please. This is first kind of true confession time. As we're in a church, right, Lily? I got off the vestry in December. And before I got off, I was again in favor, and we're promoting, in fact, what Edmund and Terry have proposed to us to propose to you. And that is to take down the bell tower and put a hip roof on the side of the church. I have now had a change of heart. And it just basically, when I saw this and saw what we're going to look like, the church is going to look like after we got done with this project, I just think that I know I'm going to regret it, and some of you may regret it down the road, that we made the decision to actually take down the bell tower. So my first apologies to Edmund and to Carlos. I know they've done a tremendous amount of work, spent a lot of hours on this project, and they brought to us what they thought was the best proposal for the church, and I appreciate that very much. I don't think we have, and this is just not meant to be derogatory, but I think the architect that we have that is doing the work for us now, I don't think is somebody who is qualified in the area of doing preservation work for historic buildings. And I don't think we're looking at enough options of what we might be able to do with the bell tower besides taking most of it down and putting a roof over the top of it. I just think we need to take a pause and maybe look at some possible other alternatives for the project that we're looking at. I mean, the bell tower itself, was in, I guess, good shape structurally and so forth for 65 years. And then back in 1993, 29 years ago, there was discovered some leaks and so forth, and I'm assuming it was taken care of because, again, a few years ago, we started having the leaks again, but basically the tower has been a good structure, 65 years, then fixed 29 years ago. Now we find ourselves with the same situation. We have leaks. We know what the problem is. It hasn't been maintained. We have 3 of the 4 windows at the top that are missing. There's no louvers, so we have snow, ice that comes in. So obviously you're going to get damage. The grouting has been missing. We had a whole wall here of ivy, which again deteriorated the grout. And now we have water seeping in. Some of the surrounds, the limestones around the windows and so forth are damaged. So we know what the problem is. We know what has to be fixed. Just like on the east wall, we knew what the problem was there. The grout, the water coming in. And again, we went ahead and fixed it, and we put up a new east wall successfully. I just think about our church and think about what it means to the community, Camden. And it's a beautiful building. Everybody loves this building. They love the Congregational Church, the Baptist Church, just makes this whole community. And I just think to change our church would diminish our presence in the community here in Camden. We've now spent $200,000 on the tower so far. And what we have is a well-wrapped, protected tower, which prevents the rain and the water from coming in. And we have a design by an architect, which I just showed you, for what the roof would look like, the hip roof on the building. We don't have anything else besides that at this point. So I guess the point I'm making is my recommendation to the church is to take a break and sit back and let's think about what else we might be able to do besides taking down the bell tower. And so I'm the guy up here making the suggestion. You probably say, well, what are you going to do? My suggestions would be a couple things. First, speak with an architect who's experienced in doing preservation work. And somebody's quite a bit different than our architect we have now. If you go to the website and look at Chuck Campbell in Waterboro and look at his portfolio of buildings he's done, it really doesn't match the kind of work that we're trying to do here on the church. Secondly, I discuss our needs with some masonry contractors, talk to them about what we have here, show them the pictures, have them go up in the tower if they need to. I'd also talk to some general contractors locally here, just talk about our situation with them. I would also meet with the representatives of the Chestnut Street Baptist Church, the Congregational Church, who both just gone through major, again, renovations on the steeples and the clock, and see what they did, see what funding they found, and see exactly, what we might be able to learn from what they did. I'd also contact 3 Episcopal churches who are currently or have just gone through renovating their bell towers. One is St. Luke's in Jamestown, New York. One of them is Grace Church in Newton, Massachusetts. Another one is St. Mark's Church in Scarborough, Massachusetts, and talk to them about what, again, their experience has been, just so that we can get more insight into what we can do, possibly, changing a little bit of the bell tower, could do some other things than just taking it down and putting the roof over the top. So my request to all of you is to ask the building committee to maybe hold up and give us a little bit of time. The RAP is keeping the water out of the church at the moment. So I think we have some time to think through this. Maybe we have some better solutions of what we could do with the tower. Thank you.
Would you care if I respond, or would you like to respond?
Thank you, Bill. I think a lot of your suggestions are worthwhile. I think we really should not take very long at all. I mean, a number of those things that you asked to have done could be done in a month. I think more information would be helpful. I think that the size of the tower, I think we sometimes are getting caught up with it and thinking that it's a huge project. It's really 300 square feet of space, maybe. maybe 400. It's not a huge thing. So I think we have to like try to keep this whole thing in perspective. I know that part of our thinking has been that we want to leave this church in a good place for the future. We know that that tower has been, as you say, it's stood there, but it's been a source of trouble all along. It hasn't been fixed and been good. And then now it's deteriorated. I mean, I think, as you know, there's always flaking down here. Well, there's a leak in the wall that there are a lot of things that have to get taken apart and put back together. And if you say, if it wants to be, people change their mind, or if they think what we're doing is wrong, then we should hear from everybody and then we can change direction. You may eventually need to get a new junior warden because the current one might just get fed up.
So if I could, if
Hold on. I don't believe all the things have been addressed. Carlos, do you want to talk about something else first?
sure. So I do want to rewind the clock. I would ask everyone, if you have not looked at all the material that is out there on what we have done in regards to the bell tower. Bill, respectfully, we use a restoration specialist. Building envelope specialist is exactly, that's what they do. And they came in and did an assessment, and you'll see all the mortar analysis, all the work that was done. It is a restoration of what is there now. The challenge is that they still came back with a price of $1.3 million to restore it before the rise in costs of the pandemic that we have. So from our perspective, the structure, the design has been problematic. As we indicated last time, it is a source of deterioration because of exposure and the way it was designed, where it's a combination of stone, rubble, and lath. Water gets in there unless it is, and it has to be allowed to wick out. And with the freeze thaws that we've had, that's why that wall, the east elevation wall, had that issue that it has. It will have that issue again. And so this is a constant cost of retention and rebuild. What we're suggesting is there's really two choices. Do we put a conventional roof over the Lady Chapel? Or do we have an ornament? Or do we put a conventional roof over the Lady Chapel with an ornament? There's no spire on it, no cross, no anything right now. The bell tower, as Edmund indicated, is not to scale. It's too small. All the churches that you look at with these functional bell towers, they are as high as the highest point in the church, because when they were built historically, they were to protect against marauding individuals. It was a source to protect the entrance. The second is there's an entrance or some other factor that it has. There's no entrance there at all. It's a non-functional piece other than it holds the Carolina bells. We can make the determination that we want to do that, but it is a substantial investment that we will have to do, $500,000 or more, to be able to do that. And when we look at all the other things that need to be done in the church, the most pristine, the most great thing about this church, in my opinion, are the stained glass windows. You don't see these almost anywhere. They will need to be restored in the relatively near future. It's been 100 years. That cost will be immense. How much can we do to retain a structure that has from day one been problematic? Its connection to the roof, that roof interaction with with the rest of the building and what it's had to do with the organ. It would be a fine idea to retain it. Is it worth it from the cost perspective? And that's for us to decide. For me, it's a question of function, a roof that will shed water and snow, and to ornament it accordingly so that it looks attractive. None of what we've asked the architect to do is to do that yet. Or do we retain the ornament as structured now and the costs associated with that? And then how do we go about doing that? Those are the questions. I think, well,
One,
that's fine, Jim. Just talk loud.
yeah, one of the questions I have, and I think Bill's raising, who was the architect?
That reviewed it the first time?
Who,
So building envelope specialist who their role, talking about going to websites and looking at what they've done, what they do is they restore stone buildings all over the country, from Texas all the way to the library in Eastport. They worked on St. Luke's Church. They're the ones who gave us the drawings and the approach to do
Yeah.
the east elevation. They are restorers. That firm has been merged with another firm in Boston. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but those principles are still there. And we could bring them back in. Every 12 months or so, I get a phone call asking where we are in the project and would you want us to help you with it. So that the capabilities to do the work are there. What I'm saying, it's an immense cost.
what role does Chuck in Damascotta, what role does he play?
What Chuck did for us was to give us conceptual look at putting a conventional solution in as an alternative to what was proposed as from BES. If you will go back to the material, and I'm sorry to ask you to.
No,
dig
look,
through
no,
150
I skimmed through it, and believe me, I know you've put a lot of time into it, and I understand you're fed up, and I understand your side of it because you spent a lot of time on this, and now we're questioning. I think, from my mind, the problem I had, and I would like to clarify, when I looked at what Chuck Thompson did, he has, from what I can see, commercial buildings, but no specific historical church work. I guess maybe it would make a lot of people feel better, at least me. Who was the architect that came up with the designs that were being shown? Because having restored 200-year-old homes, I got to tell you, when I saw the pictures of what it would look like, I thought, good grief, it looks awful. But, drawings are drawings. But so who was the architect, and does it make sense for another, I don't know, 10 grand, which appears when I through the history of what the architects, to take a look at it? I don't know, but that's one thought I have. The second comment I'll have is I can't be the only person who, and a lot of us are retired, who have seen the value of their investments crater over the last 3 months. Not a good time to start. Not a good time to start trying to raise money, in my opinion. And so I would suggest that if the wrapping is holding up, now's not a good time to start.
Well, the wrapping has a 3-year life and it was put on in March of 2020 is when that was done. So we're rapidly coming up on its 3-year life now. Because whatever we do, it is going to take about a year's worth of lead time. So you're
Understood.
going to need to be out in raising funds anyway. The person who recommended using Chuck was Corja.
Was who?
Corja, being the engineering firm in Camden. Corja is one of the, for those who are in the banking world who do commercial real estate transactions, is well-regarded firm in town. Used by all the banks in the state and was the ones who did the engineering estimates. So Chuck did the basic architectural drawing. Corja did the engineering behind it. So I would say that you'd have to expand beyond just looking at Chuck's website as to what he was doing. They believe that he would be a good person to help us go through the thought process here. Just to tell you, you were asking this, the history, that's the history.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Terry.
I'm talking as a parishioner and as a volunteer. One of the things that I realized after the pandemic, and I want everybody to think about this, was that I didn't realize until we came back in May of 2021, how much I missed, not the building. I was in the building more often than probably everybody that's sitting here besides Lisa. So I didn't miss the building. What I missed is what this church does for us spiritually, emotionally, and without it, I didn't realize how much I missed it. It didn't matter what the outside looks like. What matters, and I think people have to take this into consideration, what matters is what this church is doing for us as a community. And I just felt that it's something I needed to say, because I think people need to think about what it really means to be St. Thomas parishioners, and it's not what the building looks like. Without the building, if we could all sit in the parish hall, it would be the same thing to me, because I didn't realize how much I missed people. And so I just wanted to ask people to think about that as well as what everything else is being said.
Go ahead. Bill, you had a comment you want to make?
We were talking about the architect and so forth. I didn't want to get into more detail. I'm concerned also for the people who are doing the estimates on what the cost would be for the tower work and so forth. When it was back in the BES was a good firm, obviously, it worked with us on the east wall. When they came up in 2019 with their estimate of what it would cost to redo the tower and so forth and put it back, it was between $620,000 and $680,000. Theirs was to take down the entire east wall of the bell tower, reconstruct it.
Yeah.
And the one that we have now, they're talking about taking it down, but we would mortar and so what I'm trying to say, mortar all of the spaces between the brick, the granite that's on there today. When the firm that's doing our estimating now, in August of this year, the estimate was 475,000. September it was $1,005,000. In October, it's 934,000. It's just a moving target. When you ask them about, why it cost $37,000 to take the gutters off of the building, and say that, well, there's all kinds of things to me that don't make sense in the estimates that we're receiving today from this firm, the local firm that we're talking about here. So there is an architectural firm in Portland that's done a lot of work with preservation work. They've done work for the Portland Museum of Art, Bowdoin College, Maine Maritime. And the woman who heads up that substantial architectural firm happened to be an apprentice under Chris Glass. She has the same feel for this, again, preservation work that Chris has shown throughout his career here in the state of Maine. So there's people there, and that firm is by way doing our old church, St. Thomas's old church up on High Street, which is the old meeting building, which was the beginning of this church, which is now going to be Bay Chamber Concerts. And she's doing the renovation work architecturally on that. So to me, that's the kind of person that should be looking at do this kind of work for our church. And the
So,
last thing I should say, I threw that whole list of things out about what we should be doing. And I certainly would be willing to volunteer to do a lot of legwork on what we're talking about doing if the church decides to take a step back and look at some alternatives. Thank you.
so again, and Bill, I apologize for keeping to rewind the history and the record. BES, if you recall the last time we met, the picture that Edmund showed that showed the blue and the pink colors, that was done by BES. And instead of Corja redoing that, they said this is what we would do if we were to repair that. So it's an apples to apples comparison. The big difference in costings is that BES would have gone through and marked every stone and restored it as if it was a painting. The new estimate that came through that they provided us, which is $500,000, $450,000 more than what it would be to put the roof on, is to repair it and not be careful as to what stones went back where. Basically a commercial repair. So you have one cost, which is standard repair. The other one was a restoration. In between, there's probably a midpoint that you would come to an agreement on. But it still doesn't change the issue that it's $500,000 or more difference in cost, and it is going to be substantially more to maintain. We've had much greater success maintaining the stonework that sits under the pitched roof. The two elevations that have had damage to them over these 100 years are the ones exposed to the weather. The east elevation and the tower. The rest of the stonework is in fine shape and easier to maintain because the water sheds off the roof. It's not an issue. I agree. Those pictures that were put together at the end were at best sophomoric from the quality. They weren't done by a digital artist, and we would clearly, if going to that final step, we would get a digital artist to do it. They were done with whatever software they had available, because we weren't paying him a whole, excuse my language, we weren't paying him very much to give us the spectrum of choices. Clearly going from where we are now to where we would go later on is a much higher level of work that needs to be done, including all of the design work on the inside that would need to be able to accommodate the new roof line. All of that has to be considered before we would move stick one. So again, for me, it's very simple. It's terrible. It's not simple. It's a very difficult decision. The question is it worth maintaining a structure that is going to be more costly to maintain, more costly to rebuild, and consistently has been a problem historically and will continue to be a problem because it doesn't fix the roof line issue between the tower and the main church and the cricket that's there? Or is it better to go with a different alternative that will look different, but will be less costly, more effective from a maintenance perspective, and able to be retained for the future? Please, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The new structure as proposed has, I'm sorry, the question was asked, will there be bells? And the answer is yes. There's been at least, we're planning to have 1 or 2 bells be retained in the new structure. Effectively, the carillon of bells, the 11 bells or 9 bells, whatever it is, that exists now there is not accommodatable within this design. But that doesn't preclude us from going to another part of the campus that we have here and erecting a bell carillon like other churches do. The reason why the louvers were removed wasn't because some vandal got up there and removed them, it's because the bells could not be heard. And so the louvers were taken down so that we could hear. There's a challenge with the structure. It is more cosmetic than it is functional. And I agree, it is a lovely structure. But is it worth maintaining the challenge over the years and for the future? That's the question.
Barbara, did you have a question?
Barbara, do you mind speaking at one of the mics? It would be helpful.
I've been thinking about this a lot. I used to run a construction and real estate company. I know about creep. You get an estimate and then there's a hurricane or there's a pandemic or there's something. So the money that we're looking at now most likely would increase. I think, and forgive me for being really blunt, I think it would be an obscene investment. I think there are so many other things that our people, our congregation, our community need than a bell tower that was poorly constructed initially, has been problematic since then, and would only cost more and create problems. Look at us, most of us are gray. I don't want to put this as a burden on our congregation now or in the future. So I think it would be built, forgive me, but I disagree with you almost 100%.
Hello. So I'm going to break it down to what I was thinking when I was going through this process on the vestry. And I can say that my thought process is very simple, and I'm not an architect and I have very limited experience in construction other than home ownership. However, one thing that I know is that when you have a pitched roof like this, you do not put a chimney here. And that's essentially what it looks like to me, is a chimney. And the reason you don't do that, especially in Maine, is because of the weather and the snow and everything else that affects the runoff. And I also know that my father put up a stovepipe in one of our homes growing up on that side. And when we came back the next winter, it was in upstate New York. It had fallen down from the snow. So my thought process was, it seems like if we repair it, it is going to be a constant and everlasting problem, that it should have been on one of the gable ends if you're going to put the tower there. So that is my non-professional opinion, and my thought process was that if we were to fix it, you may fix it temporarily, but it is an ever-present ongoing issue. And if you really want to have a bell tower, then maybe you take it down and then put it somewhere where that won't happen. And then that's not an option that's been looked at, but I would imagine that would be even more costly. It seems like a very large expense for something that shouldn't have been put there. And I didn't realize it was almost entirely ornamental as well. Learned that today. So that's it.
Oh,
Yes?
I'm sorry. Please.
So I think it's really important that we all stick together, whatever direction we take. This is not worth, a tower or anything is not worth divisions among us, in my opinion. I would like to say that I've worked on the Historic Resources Committee of the town for many decades. And I think it's always been worthwhile if we've had a consultation with a historic preservation architect, just as a a guarantee that we've done our due diligence for the beauty of the historic buildings that we have been talking about. And I would suggest that Jim's idea of hiring a consult, a second opinion, not to erase all the good work that has been done during this pandemic by our leaders, because they have done wonderfully during a time when we really didn't come to meetings very much. We didn't talk about things very much. But before we charge ahead, why not do our due diligence and have at least a consultation with someone with experience in historic stone buildings?
Yes, we can do that.
That's fine.
Again, I think from my perspective, I would like us to keep moving on this and not pause. Even if we're taking a little detour, but we've got to keep going. That wrapping isn't going to last. We don't have the time to fix it and then think about it. That's already happened. We're well past the fix it and think about it. We've now got to do something. And I know it's difficult, but it's we have to do it. Yes, ma'am, or sir. Oh, Sarah, sorry. Wrong glasses.
Too many things to tie up my mask. So I was on the vestry, as you know, until December 2020, and then I took a year off. So I have been with Carlos and Edmund and all the rest through the sort of initial part of this journey. And there is a tremendous amount of work that's gone on. So when Carlos says, look at the paperwork, we're talking about 154 pages. And I know he's said that before, but it means if you go to your computer and you go to the website and you go on the menu and you go to Bell Tower update, if you go in through there, you can find a document that is 154 pages long. And I just looked at it again recently because I needed to refresh my memory. And there are photographs of every little crack where there's a problem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just reiterating that it'd be a good idea to look at that. The other thing is that in the beginning, we had some larger drawings for people to understand. And I have that drawing. You may not be able to see it from there, that illustrates what Kendra was talking about with that V between the roof and the tower. Oopsie. Okay, and so we know that the main problem, one of the problems is ice collecting here, but one of the biggest problems was correct me if I'm wrong, the actual nature of the mortar that was used, because it was very permeable. And someone else has talked about that as well, that they actually analyzed it in laboratories to see what is our problem here? Why are we having this problem over and over? So that has been done. And you might say, oh, well, we can build it with a better proportion of ingredients this time around. But when I start to think about the tower, that now sort of coming into it again freshly, my first thought coming out of the pandemic was the pandemic has shown us that the church is about more than bricks and mortar. While we're sitting in the church, we don't even see the tower. When you come into church, you might see it for a moment, and then you're in the door and you're in here. If you're in the town, I don't suppose you see it very much unless you're walking along here. I don't know, maybe from Mount Batty, you can see the town. I don't know. I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm just trying to say how important is it and how important is it to restore? I am also very fond of old things. My parents had a 1700 and something house on the water in Devon. And the problems were enormous. And eventually, as a family, once my parents had both gone, we had to say, we have to give this up. And I'm sure there are many of you who have had to give up historical things in your family in the past. There comes a time, we're 6 in my family, 6 siblings. The cost was not the whole thing. My brother Pete, who's the handyman, spent every holiday doing the repairs until he said, or we all said, even though we wanted to keep it, you've got to let go. So I think I would encourage you to think about how important is it really? I have some other drawings that you don't have of a tower that has a pyramid on the top. The bottom one, we discarded that one. Wasn't going to be helpful because you've still got the V space, where the tower joins the roof. So I'm going to ask you to re-look at, of course I didn't bring the right drawing up. Re-look at the drawings that show you this hip roof that's going to go over it. Think of it in terms of Camden as a maritime town, and try to think of it as it being an upturned boat. That's how it looks to me, and I don't find it an unpleasant notion at all. Going back to the idea of restoring old things, there are many places, old churches that have had to restore their buildings in a modern way. Even St. Albans Abbey, which is over 900 years old, as they expanded and grew, they had to build a very modern kind of entry area on the side. Just throwing that out. And as a final thing, I would throw out that in England, if we're trying to go after English architecture, in England, the weather is so different. The snowdrops flower in January. Last weekend in January, first week of February, that is when the snowdrops flower. The daffodils are nearly always over before Easter, believe it or not. And so I'm just throwing that out there, well, maybe it'll help you remember, but that's all. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to
Please.
say something. Part of all the studies from the engineers tell us that, and the reason we're not using the bells now is because they were afraid that the vibration would hasten the deterioration of the tower and it might fall down. The second thing I'd like to say is that the conceptual drawings that we have from Chuck Campbell are just that. He has not spent lots of time on this because we were asking, well, what should we do? And he said, well, you could do this or this or this. But he wanted us to decide at least one thing, and then he would spend our money and his time going further. So I think yeah, the quality of those drawings would not be the quality of what we would end up with. And if they didn't get better, well, then we would discuss that with. I just wanted to throw that out there too. We're still at the beginning of this process. We just need to make a choice, then we will go and learn more.
Please.
Obviously, I'm married to Bill. And so, just like Terry is married to Carlos, so, we all have our opinions. However, all of this work that's been done about all the cracks and the mortars and everything, if another architect or two were called in for consultation, all that is work they would not have to do, because all that legwork and everything has been done. And a new architect can work from what the problems are. And the two architects that we looked at have just restored in the three churches towers that look exactly like ours. And so my thought is, what is the harm, since the grunt work has been done, at looking at another architect who's an historical architect and has worked on exactly the same thing? What is the harm in looking at it before we proceed? And also, how can you make a decision if it could change on what we haven't seen? So I just think since the hard work has been done, that looking at another or listening to another architect or two about what they have done on the exact same things is not harmful.
Oh, I'm sorry, Shirley first.
When my daughter came to visit last May, and mind you, I'm going to boast a bit, she's president of a college in New York. She didn't say, oh, wow, what a beautiful bell tower. She came in the church and said, wow, Mom, this is gorgeous. It reminds me of Great Britain. Thank you.
I'll just be very, very brief, but I think what I would like to bring to people's attention is the major problem there is where the tower joins the church, particularly the roof. My basic academic training is an Arctic alpine biologist. I spent a lot of time in the mountain in upstate Vermont and got to watch the action of frost. The valleys that are necessary to join the tower with a water shedding roof also hold snow and ice. I've photographed them here. And what happens under the visible snow is freezing and thawing and lifting of slate shingles, lifting of shingles, whether they're slate or some other material, and penetrating into the roof at the point where it joins the church, which is probably where this particular problem comes from. It also has affected part of the organ. So when you're thinking about any future resolution of the problem, that join between the church roof and the tower, however it is accomplished if the tower stays, needs to be a very important one to look at.
Other questions, comments? This was an informational meeting. It's not a decision meeting today. I think this will be taken back to the vestry and the building committee for their thought. I clearly hear there appears to be, I would ask for a show of hands if I read the consensus correctly, that there's a request that we continue forward, but consult another architect with restoration history and ask them to also provide an opinion so that we have that as a final piece, and do it in an expeditious manner. That this would not take months or years, but it'd be accomplished in a very short period of time. Just to get a second opinion is what I'm hearing. Is that the consensus of this organization, in this group, these members in this room? Okay.
I see people essentially nodding, right? That's where
Okay.
you're nodding up and down. That's a yes?
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to end us with a prayer.
Yeah, that too. The Lord be with you. Let's pray. Lord, we are listening for your will. We are looking for a way. We are looking for a way to be your community in this place and beyond these walls, knowing that what happens here isn't just about the beauty, though it is here. It's about what you do with us inside. It's about how we become you in the community. Thank you for being here with us as we struggle with this difficult topic. Assuage people's hearts on one side or the other. If we listen, we will be able to come through this as a body. We ask that you give us the patience to be able to follow this through gently and with great respect for each other. In your name we pray. Amen.